Okay, we're standing at the corner of Jalan Tanjong and Upper Changi Road. This was where the Badok Lutheran Church first had its first place that we met together. Number 1, Jalan Tanjong. It was a semi-detached house, a very small house, and behind me on my left is a house that looked just like that. The actual property was on this side. And this is David Wong. David was one of he and his family were one of the 3 families that moved into this area. And the Lutheran Church had decided we wanted to start work in this area. We had churches in the center, Queenstown Lutheran Church, and in the west, Jurong Christian Church. And the idea was to start a church in the east. And this was to be the location. So David Wong, his family, and 2 other families were the nucleus of the starting of the congregation. They moved here, and from them the church grew. The main growth came from Billy Graham Crusade that took place in December 1979, and from the Billy Graham Crusade we got the names of 50 people that lived in Badok North. And David Wong and his wife, and Charlie Chong and his wife, and we visited all of those families, invited them to come to our church. And then out of that group, 21 did eventually become church members. On Easter 1979, the first group was baptized in this building right here. A month later, the church was organized as a congregation with our first church council and so on, and then it just continued to grow out of this particular spot. So David,
yes. I think at that time we want just to rent a small house, right? And that is nearby to the Badok, because our target for building our new church is in the new town, Badok South. Right? So we rented this place. Actually, before we decided to rent this place, we have contacted Anglican Church. There is a church inside, intended to use the premises for the meeting. They have their Chinese and English services, so they didn't agree to let us use that, right? So finally we got this house, and it was a Christian lady, right? And rented in my name. I remember using my name. So we started our mission over here.
Well, after the baptism of those first members at Easter 1979, together with the 3 families, Lutheran families that were in this area, we had enough adult members to form a congregation. And so a month later, in May, the first congregation was organized and formed. It had to have 21 voting members at that time. That means those that were over the age of 21. And we had that amount of membership, so we organized a congregation and elected the first church council.
So we make motions in the church council to organize this as congregations. So we adopt this motion. It reads in such a way, right? We, the undersigned members of the Badok Lutheran Church, do on this Sunday, 27 May 1979, united together in our faith to organize these congregations, to adopt these constitutions, and to signify our intention to be a congregation of the Lutheran Church in Malaysia and Singapore, so that through us the gospel of Jesus Christ may be proclaimed and his kingdom expand.
That declaration was signed in by all the members, and I think it is still in the Badok Lutheran Church. A copy. It used to be on the wall there. I don't know if it's around there someplace now. But it has the signatures of all the original members there at that time. So the congregation was organized. It became a self-supporting congregation with their offerings, paying for the rent and the telephone and all the local expenses there. As David mentioned earlier, our intent always was to have a church in Badok New Town. We knew the government would make a religious site available there, and so we were waiting for that to happen. These pictures here show the beginning of the Badok Lutheran Church here at Jalan Tanjong. These pictures, it says in the beginning, and this picture here was taken when we dedicated this building. We started to work there in November 1978, and David Wong was my translator. Then this picture is of the first group that was baptized in April, Easter Sunday, the following year, 1979. See that? And then the church council that was elected from this membership, and those three families were living here. Here, this picture is the members signing the declaration that we form a congregation for the glory of God and to expand His kingdom here. So these four pictures then are the early pictures from the church here at Jalan Tanjong. So it was the church, although it was just a small building and a few people, and it grew into a larger group. Now we're standing in front of the Badok Lutheran Church in Badok Avenue 2. This was the religious site that the HDB made available in this housing estate. We tendered for it and were successful in getting it. The other three churches in Singapore joined together with this small congregation. We had about 50 members then. And Redeemer Lutheran Church, Queenstown Lutheran Church, and Jurong Christian Church, they all three gave money together with this congregation to build the first unit. This section right here is the second unit. So it was built in 2 units. So we built that first unit, and in 1985 we moved into this building. And of course all the people in the flats around here were watching as the church was being built. So it was very easy to reach out to them. Many of them came to the first service we had. From that, we just would visit the people around here, invite them to church, and the congregation grew very rapidly. David was involved in all of that. We had 3 language services actually. We had English, the Mandarin, and then we had a service in Indonesian language, because Mr. Manik was here, and then there were the Malay-speaking people in this area. So we had those 3 services every Sunday. Anyway.
I think the block 36 is near our church. Initially, some of the residents are quite hostile because we start the service at 8:30. Then you play with drum and the music, you know. So on Sunday morning, so sometimes they throw the bottle down on our roof, right, to protest about it. Can you remember that?
Yes, I remember that.
Then we start to visit them, to make friends with them. So now, after 40 years, our relationship is very good.
Yes, and many of them became members too, from the Block 36. There were quite a few members from that particular block, and 34, the ones closest to the church. And then we had the Boys Brigade here, and they had a bagpipe band. And of course, when they would practice, then everybody around here would get very upset because it was quite noisy. So we had to reduce that down. So this was an incentive to get air conditioning in the church, because then we could close it off and we wouldn't disturb the neighbors either with the music or with the bagpipe bands or the Boys Brigade or any of the. And started the kindergarten here with members of the congregation as teachers. And from the very beginning, there were many children coming to the kindergarten, and we would then visit the homes of the children together with the teachers and invite them to come to the church. So there were many contacts that we had with the neighborhood, and the congregation just grew very rapidly from that. We're now seated in the chapel of Badok Lutheran Church. This was the first unit that was built of the church, and it was designed so that the wall at the back would open up into the parish hall, so we could seat more than are in the chapel. The chapel would seat over 100 people, but the very first service we had to open up the back wall because we had more than 100 people came just to the opening service, and from that time on it grew and grew. So we would get the names of all the visitors that came, and we would visit them within the next week, tell them about the church and invite them to become members, explain anything they had questions on. Worship services grew in number all the time. And the people that would come, they were always very good evangelists because most of their family and their friends were non-Christian. And so they would share with them and bring them. And so in this way, the congregation grew quite rapidly. It was much faster than the others. We were here 17 years at this congregation, from 1978 till 1995. The other congregations that we started, Redeemer in Queenstown, Jurong, we only were there about 5 to 6 years, and then we would be moved on to start another congregation. But I told Bishop Peter Fong when we were here, we were starting another congregation in Yishun, but I asked him if I could stay here because I thought a congregation could grow in numbers. Usually it was about 300, but I thought we could reach 1,000 members and stay here. And so that was our goal, to have 1,000 members with services from the Chinese congregation and the English congregation. So we stayed here till 1995. And I couldn't have done all this work without Betty Liu, who was in charge of the Sunday schools and the music, always in the church. We had 2 services in the morning, and then we'd have an evening service. And the evening service was a kind of a simple service. Mainly we started it for those who could not come to the morning service, but it turned out that people would come for the evening service who were non-Christians, and so it was really became an evangelistic service for reaching out. So we continued those 3 services like that until we retired. Maybe Beilu wants to say something about the music or the Sunday schools.
Yes, my ministry was mostly in the music in the church. I played the organ, and then I helped with the Sunday school, especially the singing part of the Sunday school. We always opened with songs for all the children, and that was really a fun part of the time when we would sit, when the kids would all be singing and clapping and jumping and enjoying themselves. Later on, we started a children's choir. We had a lot of little children, maybe 5, 6 years old, and we had quite a big group that came. There were about 30 kids. And Mei Chu was our leader. She led the music, and I played the piano. And we were able to do a program called Oh My Stars, where we dressed the kids up and had a full program of Oh My Stars, and we even went over to Sentosa and performed. And now all those little children have grown up, and they are having their own little children. And I think that's the joy for us now when we come back, is to see all these people who were small and who have now grown up and are active in the church and continuing the ministry.
Okay, well, another big ministry of the church was not only the children's ministry and our kindergarten, but we had Boys Brigade and Girls Brigade companies here. They were quite large, the 32nd Boys Brigade Company. We were blessed with good officers. We had a couple of members of the congregation that had been in the Boys Brigade, and one of them had been trained as a captain. Kwek Kwan Soon was one of the early captains. Boys Brigade was always blessed with men who would serve as officers, and the captain, and the company was very active and quite large. And a lot of those boys then came into the church also. And the same was with the Girls Brigade. We had a Girls Brigade company, as well as the youth ministry. We had associate pastors that came and worked with us here. Pastor Terry Key was one, who later became the bishop of the church. And the Mandarin congregation then had their own pastors also. Pastor Lu Guan Ho was one of the early pastors there, and that congregation grew. They had good leadership, also from their lay leadership from the adult members in the Mandarin congregation. So both congregations, both the Mandarin speaking and the English congregations, grew to be quite large, and then eventually outgrew this chapel, and so we built the second unit of the church, which is the sanctuary, and then the area underneath became the new kindergarten area and our Sunday school area. When we built that second unit, then the funds all came from the local church. We had a loan from church overseas, but we paid back the loan, and money for building the second unit then was all given by the members of the congregation. So we had a quite strong stewardship as well as evangelistic outreach. We're now in the main sanctuary at the Badok Lutheran Church. This was the second unit that I talked about earlier on. It was built by the congregation, and it seats about 300 people. So twice on Sunday, first for the Mandarin congregation and then the English congregation. This facility is completely full and utilized by the congregation for that. The stained glass window that's above the altar was designed by a member of the church, and also all of the work that in that window was done by members of the congregation. Dorothy Lee, who was the pastor, who was the wife of Pastor Frederick Lee, who was here, she's the one that did the design for the window. We used to just have plain glass in that window, and we had a pilgrimage to the Holy Land one time, and one of the members on that pilgrimage saw the stained glass windows in the churches in the Holy Land, and when he came back, he gave an offering to the church to buy glass and to have our own stained glass window in front. So we had a contest of members to make a design, and the one that was chosen was the one that Dorothy Lee did. We got a professional glass cutter who came and taught us how to cut glass. If you'll notice, each one of the panels up there is the size of a door. So we had in our parish hall, in the balcony, we set up an area where we cut glass. We had those doors. Actually, we had doors on sawhorses, and then we'd put the pattern out on it and cut glass. So different groups from the church did glass. Sometimes it was a cell group, sometimes it was the choir or the Mandarin congregation, or different ones would do different sections, and then each section was made and we stored them up and finally put them all together. So on the 25th anniversary of the congregation at 2004, then that window was dedicated. Along the sides, we had just plain glass in the windows also, and we had some glass left over, so we decided we should do something in the windows on the side of the sanctuary. And so again, Dorothy Lee designed a pattern for us that goes around the windows. It starts at the back on the left side there with creation story, Adam and Eve, Moses, and so on, the prophets. And then the last prophet is Isaiah. He's pointing across. And on the other side, we have the New Testament with the birth of Christ, the ministry of Christ, his crucifixion, resurrection, and ascension, and then the Pentecost, the birth of the church, and the church worldwide, going out into the world. So the windows around the side tell that story. And so they said stained glass windows aren't complete without a rose window. All the cathedrals have a rose window. So in the back, there was a small window. So there we have the Lutheran rose. Again, Dorothy Lee designed that and cut the glass and put it in there. The front window was done by quite a few members of the congregation, but the side windows was done almost entirely by a group of men from the Mandarin congregation who would come and cut the glass for each pane as separate. The way it was financed was they had a picture of all the panes of glass, and you could give one pane of glass or you could give a whole picture, however much you wanted to sign up for. So people signed up, and within 2 weeks, we'd collected enough money to buy all the glass, stained glass for those windows on the side. So it was all not done professionally. That's all amateur work that has made the windows there.
I just want to add that besides the men who did the cutting, there was a group of women who did all the hard work, which was the washing, the cleaning, and
the
organizing, the soldering
of all the windows,
and getting it all ready. So it was a small group, maybe 8 people, And they worked hours and hours and hours, but they all worked together so well as a group, and as a result, we have these really magnificent windows. And a side story on that is they started having glass cutters happy hour once a week, and that has continued even now. We still have the glass cutters happy hour, even though the glass cutting is finished.
Yeah. So it was a good time of fellowship, and both congregations, both the Mandarin-speaking, English-speaking congregations, members were involved and did the work together. Yeah, so the women were very instrumental in installing the windows, and like after we cut the glass, each piece had to be washed and cleaned, and then they had to all be soldered together. That was a group of women did that ministry. So we put the gospel into stained glass windows. People outside see these windows and they know the story of God's love for them. As we sit inside, then we also are reminded of all that God has done for us and His story there. So these windows were all completed actually after we had retired. We retired in '95, and the windows then were just started shortly after that and completed within the last few years. So I guess that's about the story of this sanctuary. We can have Mrs. Nelson play the organ, and you can get some music then. So you.